This entire video is strictly for educational purposes and pure morbid entertainment because I don't want your terrible life choices on my conscience, and I certainly do not want to be sued by your grieving family after you try to pull a James Bond at a local hate rally. Okay, so we need to understand exactly how these pointy-headed enthusiasts actually go about finding new members in the modern era, because they obviously have to rely on extremely secretive and bizarre methods to find new recruits. Interestingly enough, one of their most prevalent modern recruitment strategies involves creeping around suburban neighborhoods at 3 in the morning like the world's most disappointing Santa Claus so they can toss Ziploc bags into random driveways. What's in these bags, you ask? A soggy bag of kitty litter containing a photocopied invitation to join a secret society of men who are terrified of diversity. This whole operation feels bizarrely similar to a desperate multi-level marketing scheme where someone is trying to sell you essential oils mixed with profound generational ignorance and a truly staggering lack of self-awareness. Unfortunately, as an infiltrator, you have to perfectly mimic the behavior of a deeply insecure man who's willing to blame literally anyone else for the fact that he has zero social skills and a mattress sitting directly on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to construct a fake backstory for your undercover persona that screams absolute mediocrity so the recruiters look at you and see the perfect blank canvas for their manipulation. You know how leaders like David Duke decided to put on cheap suits and pretend to be legitimate political figures while calling their hate groups pro-white civil rights organizations? You need to reach that level of cognitive dissonance. So massive that it could probably be seen from space, which means you gotta be mega racist. Building trust with your new buddies is arguably the most psychologically damaging part of this entire operation, because you've gone from merely handing out flyers to actually sitting in their incredibly depressing living rooms. Now you'll realize quickly that a clan meeting looks shockingly similar to a neighborhood watch meeting hosted by, I don't know, the absolute worst people on the planet. Yes, I am talking about those pesky HOA bugs that are up my ass about my stupid fence color. You might expect some sort of cinematic gathering with chanting and dramatic fire, but mostly you're just gonna be eating stale potato chips and listening to a guy named Gary complain about how women shouldn't vote or Barack Obama started the downfall of America. Now, this is where it gets interesting. You have to perfect the art of the agreeable nod, because your survival depends entirely on your ability to look genuinely interested in the most boring and offensive conversations imaginable. Meanwhile, you're secretly memorizing their faces and recording their license plate numbers so you can hand everything over to the federal authorities later. Interestingly enough, real-life infiltrators have proven that the best way to build trust with these guys is to simply let them talk, because racists absolutely love the sound of their own voices. Besides, building trust requires you to learn their ridiculous secret codes and bizarre handshakes, which sound like they were invented by a group of angry toddlers. Okay, enough jokes. This is serious, because if you laugh at their handshakes, they can shoot you. Also, I think you already know, but just prepare yourself for the sheer awkwardness of carpooling to a hate rally, because driving 3 hours in a minivan with a Grand Dragon is an absolute nightmare of small talk. You'll have to listen to terrible country music about kissing your fish and endure endless complaints about how the world is changing while you desperately try to keep your facial expressions completely neutral. Oh, and you want to know the worst part? They're definitely gonna ask you to chip in for gas money. Now, you find yourself sitting in a dimly lit basement surrounded by guys who live with their moms, and you have to listen to them explain their worldview. Interestingly enough, navigating dangerous ideologies requires the acting skills of a prime Daniel Day-Lewis combined with the patience of a kindergarten teacher on a sugar-fueled Friday afternoon. You're sitting there listening to a grown man passionately explain how secret societies are controlling the weather, and you just have to nod along. Though, you might feel the strong desire to stand up and point out the glaring historical inaccuracies in their speeches, but you must suppress that instinct entirely to protect your cover. Why? Because these gatherings often feature the most bizarre mix of mundane complaints and terrifying plots. So you might hear a guy complain about the rising costs of truck tires right before he casually suggests a domestic terrorism plot. So you have to master the art of the non-committal grunt of approval, which allows you to seem supportive without actually contributing to the madness going on around you. And here's the thing, infiltrating these groups means you're constantly exposed to a toxic sludge of hatred that can really mess with your own mental health over time. So you have to detach yourself from the words being spoken, that eventually someone in the group is going to test your loyalty by asking you a direct question about your beliefs, and you have to be ready to deliver a convincing performance that satisfies their paranoia. You must respond with a carefully crafted rant that hits all of their favorite talking points without accidentally sounding too intelligent or well researched. Interestingly enough, if you use big words or reference actual historical facts, they might get suspicious, because their entire ideology relies on blind anger and a complete rejection of basic education. So you you want to keep your answers vague and highly emotional so they feel a deep connection to your fake outrage and accept you as one of their own. But if you get stuck, you can always redirect the conversation by blaming a minority. Once you're done enduring the racist rituals, you now have to actually do the job you came to do. And that means gathering critical intel without blowing your cover. This is actually the coolest part because you have to transform into a modern-day James Bond, but instead of wearing a pristine tuxedo and ordering expensive drinks, you're wearing a cheap flammable bedsheet and drinking lukewarm domestic beer in a damp basement. Super cool. Just don't forget that these people are incredibly paranoid because they spend their entire lives consuming bizarre conspiracy theories on the internet, so their guard is always artificially high. Interestingly enough, their paranoia is usually directed at completely illogical targets like the shape of the earth or the secret ingredients hidden in tap water, so they completely overlook the actual spy sitting right next to them eating potato chips. Meanwhile, you need to figure out who's actually in charge of the circus because the KKK has an obsession with ridiculous fantasy titles that sound like they were stolen straight out of a Dungeons and Dragons manual. Specifically, you will hear grown adult men referring to themselves as the Exalted Cyclops and the Grand Dragon. Yes, it's making me want to kill myself, but we can't do that because we're James Bond. Remember? Gotta save the world from racist white men dressed as cones. Anyway, you need to mentally map out this bizarre leadership structure because taking down a low-level guy who just joined last week will not accomplish your ultimate goal of total organizational destruction. My advice is you aim for the top of the food chain, so you need to pay close attention to who gives the orders and who handles the finances because following the dirty money is always the safest way to destroy a criminal enterprise because these leaders usually have massive unearned egos and they will inevitably brag about their past crimes if you stroke their vanity just enough to make them feel like absolute criminal masterminds. On the other hand, you can't just walk into a secret cross-burning ceremony with a bright yellow notepad and a pen because that would be incredibly suspicious and probably end very badly for your overall physical health. Don't want to end up with a couple of bruises and bullet holes, do you? Okay, good. Now you have to develop a flawless photographic memory for the most mundane details like license plate numbers and the real legal names of the people hiding behind those pointy polyester hoods. Interestingly enough, many of these guys are actually local business owners or public servants who would lose their jobs instantly if their secret weekend hobbies were suddenly exposed to the general public, so memorizing their faces and matching them to their vehicles is a devastating weapon you could actually hand over to the FBI to ruin their careers. If you have the memory of a goldfish, please, I'm begging you, practice before you do anything stupid. You can practice your memory skills by creating funny little mental associations for each member, like remembering that the Grand Wizard drives a beaten-up Ford pickup and smells heavily of cheap cologne and profound personal failure. You might need to wear a wire to capture their unhinged confessions on tape, and this is where the situation becomes incredibly tense and wonderfully dramatic, like a scene pulled right out of a Martin Scorsese film. You just have to wear a bunch of tiny hidden microphones that can be concealed almost anywhere, and since your new associates are usually not the brightest bulbs in the box, they will never suspect that your completely ordinary-looking wristwatch is currently broadcasting their hate speech directly to a secure federal server. Just don't be as stupid as them. And please make sure your equipment is fully charged and securely attached because having a microphone physically fall out of your pocket during a secret meeting would create an awkward silence that no amount of smooth talking could ever possibly fix. So you should always double check your gear before you leave the house and maybe say a quick prayer to whatever deity you believe in to keep the batteries alive for just a few more hours. Now, every terrible organization has a detailed paper trail because bureaucratic paperwork is the one true universal constant in this world, and a hate group is certainly no exception to this rule. Now, your ultimate holy grail is finding exactly where the chapter secretary keeps these documents hidden, because securing that exact list will allow law enforcement to round up the entire group in one massive coordinated sweep. Lucky for you, though, because they often keep these highly sensitive documents in the most painfully obvious places, like an unlocked filing cabinet in a dusty garage or sitting right on top of the desk next to a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey. But gaining access to these documents might require you to volunteer for the incredibly boring administrative tasks, but that is a very small price to pay for the sheer unadulterated joy of eventually ruining their lives forever. Also, there's a chance you're gonna have to become BFFs with one of the racists. Let me explain. Talking on the phone removes the immediate physical danger and allows you to record the conversation perfectly while sitting comfortably in your own living room wearing pajamas instead of a ridiculous robe. Plus, people are naturally more talkative and careless when they can't see the face of the person they're speaking to, so they'll gladly spill their darkest secrets over a static-filled landline. You can just keep asking them logistical questions about upcoming rallies, and they will excitedly give you the exact times and highly specific locations, like they're planning a harmless neighborhood bake sale instead of a hate rally. Time will eventually come that you've collected every single piece of incriminating evidence and recorded every highly illegal conversation. So you must carefully prepare for the most terrifying part of this entire ordeal, which is getting the hell out of Dodge before someone notices the wire taped to your chest. Now, please don't think this is going to be easy. You should probably know that leaving a violent hate group is vastly different from canceling a gym membership, because nobody at your local fitness center is going to put a violent bounty on your head when you decide to stop showing up for leg day. Your exit strategy must be flawlessly designed and executed with the absolute precision of a seasoned spy, because these are exceptionally paranoid individuals who are already spending their entire miserable lives thinking that the government's hiding in their bushes waiting to steal their pickup trucks. You need to understand that your own personal escape plan might require abandoning your current apartment and permanently changing your phone number to avoid receiving extremely threatening voicemails from guys named Cletus who are furious that you betray their secret little racist club. You need to systematically sever all ties with these absolute losers without triggering their deeply ingrained conspiracy theories. Therefore, you should begin creating vast physical distance between yourself and the local cross-burning enthusiasts by slowly missing their weekly meetings and blaming your sudden absence on entirely mundane things like aggressive irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, who are we kidding? Nobody wants to hang out with a guy who constantly complains about explosive diarrhea, so this incredibly gross excuse will naturally make them want to actively avoid you, and it perfectly covers your tracks while you frantically pack your bags in the middle of the night. Meanwhile, you must quietly assemble a dedicated escape bag containing all your essential survival items like large amounts of cash and a prepaid burner phone. Having this emergency bag hidden in the trunk of your car ensures that you can simply hit the gas pedal and drive across state lines the very second that you feel like your undercover identity is blown. There is one downside to doing all of this though. It's the absolute sheer paranoia of constantly looking over your shoulder that will likely haunt you for a few months.